So my name is Javier Garza, as Estelle said, and I want to make a disclaimer, this is not about SP2, although the teacher I have shows it. It's going to, basically I'm going to try to share some parts of my life that are personal stories on how I organize my life, and hope will entertain all of you. One thing I want to tell you is, this talk lands the thing that time is the most precious thing in the world, and if you optimize everything that you do, you can have more time to spend on things you like, right? So if you need to remember something, remember this. Okay, cool. We are going to talk about 4 things. One is how I optimize playing computer games when I was a kid, and I get all the best scores in all the games I played. How I managed to surf in Hawaii and get a good amount of waves from the locals or without having any problems with them. And then how I reduce a long bike commute from 3+ hours to less than, to 54 minutes. And how you can apply the same principles to web performance, right? I hope everybody's with me. The first thing I'm going to tell is about how I optimize computer games. When I was a kid, I was kind of a legend between my friends, because I had the biggest, highest scores ever. And nobody could match them. And I never told my friends how I did it, but I'm going to share it with you today. All right, don't tell them. So I discovered my passion with computers very early on. I think I was 8 or 9 when I got my first computer. That's, for those of you know, it's like a Sinclair Spectrum. Yeah, they use a cassette system to load games and something like this. All right, I'm going to stop it. With some experimentation, I realized that if you stop the tape, a few seconds before it started loading, you could access the source code. So from there, I got some books in the library, how to program with BASIC, and I started changing the games, and making lives, like more lives, more credits and stuff. And that's how I got all the big time. The second thing is, a few years later, technology improved, and the games were not interpreted anymore, so they were compiled. So I learned data structures and how to use a binary editor to change the game files, where you will save a game, and again, put lives and hack all the games and get, again, all the big high scores. And in fact, this skill, got me the first job in a company, which basically I worked at a real company. I think I was 15 or something like that, removing computer virus before antivirus were popular. All right? So here are things I learned from computer games. You need to experiment, just stop the game, edit the game file, start. You need to learn. I learned programming, data structures and all things. And the most important thing, you need to enjoy it. I made the highest scores. I use skills for careers and stuff. All right? So that's the first thing. The second thing is about surfing. I lived a few years in Hawaii. You can see over there, and I fell in love with the ocean. I learned how to surf, and I improved my skills pretty quickly by reading books, watching videos on the internet, and practicing, of course, a lot. For those of you who are not familiar with surfing, there is a very important rule that you need to know, right? So many people line up to get a wave, and when the wave comes, everybody paddles at the same time, and the first person who stands in the wave, usually close to the peak of the wave, owns the wave, and everybody else should yield to him or to her, right? So the only problem is in Hawaii, there are people who were born, surfing in a surfboard, so it's very, very hard to get a wave, if you have 2 or 3 of those in the same wave. So with the time, I developed my own secret system that I'm going to share with you today, as long as you don't tell anybody else outside here, okay? Cool. That's the big before. But yeah, so I'm going to share the secret now. Here it is. That's my secret formula. I'm going to explain it, so you who are not very familiar with the mathematics. The first thing I did is I leveraged the internet to get good weather reports and to discover which surf spots are the best with which tide and tide swell direction. I learned something called dawn patrol, which basically means you paddle out when it's still dark, and then when you are in the soft spot, you know, as possible, something far away that it will take people a long time to go. When the sunrise comes, you have 20 minutes or so, you know, before you have to share the wave with somebody else. I learned to observe good surfers, you know, where they located in the wave. When the wave came, you know, they were in the best spot to take the wave. So basically I stand behind them, and when they took the wave, I just took their spot. I learned how to count the waves. You know, the waves comes in sets of, you know, 2, 3, 4 sometimes. And so basically everybody fights for the first wave. So I learned to have some patience, let people go, and then take the second or the third all by myself. And another thing I learned is to develop a competitive advantage. So basically, I always swim my whole life, but I trained swimming 1 hour a day for a year or two until I got fast enough to beat people by sprinting. And then also I learned how to stand up in the surfboard like as fast as anybody else. You know, so usually when you try to surf, you know, you paddle, then you look, you stand like this in the wave. You look if somebody comes, and then you stand up. So what it is, I paddle and jump. And that's how I got many, many waves. All right. And the other thing is you need to keep learning and trying new things. And when you think you are pretty good and you can surf any wave, then you start venturing with bigger waves. But that's a different story for a different talk. Okay. All right. So things I learned. You know, you need to learn. You know, either books, videos, internet, wherever you can. Observe, you know, watch the sets, you know, the good surfers. You need to practice, improve your technique, find a strategy that works for you and it makes difference between everybody else, and enjoy it. You know, there is something called Surfer High. I'm not going to explain it, but you can Google it. It's a very interesting experience, all right? So the third one is my bike commute. I'm going to tell you how to optimize a long bike commute. Since 2002, which is the time I first moved to Hawaii, I've been biking to work. And I always try to live close to the office, but the office has been moving away from me, right? So I always have to be like, you know, close to work. Okay, this is how my daily commute looked like 5 years ago. Okay, you can see everything, perfect. I will take my mountain bike and I will take the quickest path to get to the office. Our office in Akamai was located very close to the College of San Mateo, the top of the hill. So I will go up the hill, you know, as far as possible. And on my way back, I will take a big detour, you know, it's more than double the route, but I take a few parts and I do mountain biking in a single track, which was a lot of fun. That changed in March 2014 with Akamai closed the office in San Mateo and opened 2 offices. One in Santa Clara, a larger office, and a smaller one in San Francisco. Anyway, I was living at that time in Foster City, which was 30 miles more or less from each of them. So suddenly, you know, my commute jumped from 6 miles to 30 plus miles, and how do I approach this problem? So basically I checked different routes in Google Maps. I talked with a few friends, you know, and we went on the first ride, which is, I think, this day, and it took us over 3 hours to do the 30 miles to work. But we all came with a big smile on our faces, right? With the time, I tried different routes. Every day I took basically a different route to see if I could get a more optimized way. And in a month or so, I lowered half an hour faster, so in 2.5 hours. I keep optimizing my route. You know, I took less weight on my backpack. I left my laptop at home and I got a desktop in the office. You know, I changed my mountain bike with a carbon road bike, and I keep improving, and I lowered to 137. Basically, you can see there. And with the time, you know, if you keep biking, your legs will get stronger. And I managed to lower to 133. I think I was coming late for a meeting, and that's when I made my best time. But at this time, you know, it was really, really hard to get any faster. All right. So by the end of 2016, I moved to San Carlos, which is beautiful place, 5 miles away from here, same view as you have here. And I found a route with almost no traffic lights. And I invested in technology and I bought an electric bike. And I was able to manage to reduce my commute to under 1 hour. And it gets better than that, you know. So I started taking CrossFit classes, body pump, and so on. I pumped my legs even more. and I made it in 54 minutes. All right, so that's my record so far. And again, with a big smile on my face when I made it. The most important thing that you learn from this is you need to measure, track, use a GPS to keep track of everything that you do. For example, the routes, the heart rate, average speed, etc. Improve the cardio, leg muscles, improve the equipment, and enjoy. Right? So we are 2 minutes away. So how all this applies to web performance? So it's basically the same. Whatever problem you have, you can apply the same techniques. First, you have to check everything that you have to whatever issue you have. For example, for web performance, you have different things. You have the DNS, the network, backend, and frontend. And there's a ton of things that you can do to optimize those. So basically, in the DNS, you can get a distributed DNS infrastructure. There are many cloud providers, they offer that. In the network, you improve the protocol, the latency, for example, getting a CDN. The backend, there is tons of things you can do, hardware, network, etc. And the front end too, we have talks about this. And the next thing you do is, learn some web performance best practices and optimize each of the different areas that we talked before. You have to keep measuring for improvements, continuous monitor, stay up to date with new technologies like HTTP2, Quick, BBR, TLS 1.3, resource hints, come to conferences like this. Using this approach, I've been helping customers, most of the companies you use with your cell phones every day for the last 10 years. And in fact, a few years ago, I helped a company who delivers, information to mobile phones, to many, I always say half of the phones probably in the world. And they deliver, I think it's 1 million API hits per second, which is a lot. And basically help them reduce the time it takes to get information to mobile clients from 3 seconds to 1, which is awesome, right? So that's one last thing, I'm finishing with this, is remember to optimize everything you can and use the extra time that you have for things you like this, right? All right, thank you.